Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Valeria and this is the Off-Road Range. Today I will tell you about factors to take into account when choosing a plot to buy. I promised you this many times in my previous videos. And right now, in order not to waste your time, I say in advance that here I will list criteria that relate to ennobling the land with your own hand and some degree of involvement in construction, site planning, farming and so on. But even if you plan to buy a plot on a turnkey basis and you need a complete range of services for your maximum comfort and minimum waste of time, you should remember that real estate agencies rely on the fact that you will not see really important factors. Their task is to hide the flaws, embellish what is, create demand, and sell at a high price even if it's not worth it. While you won't find here information that pertains to land selection in closed private villages, protected villages, villages with turnkey shared infrastructure and annual maintenance fees, I recommend you watching this video and perhaps taking a look at criteria to understand what is really important and where realtors try to splurge. For a person who has never encountered nature and remembers geography only from school textbooks, the whole earth may look the same. Moreover, few people think about the engineering issue and the characteristics of soil for the construction of buildings. In this case, those who think about buying a plot look on the internet for superficial knowledge that is not key. As usual, the most common factors when choosing a site are convenient location, availability of infrastructure, price and size. All of this is correct, but this is only a very small part. There are many factors that seem insignificant or difficult, but they need to be told. I cannot start the video with a few of the most important parameters because everyone has their own. Someone dreams of a house by the sea and doesn't consider other options. Someone is fond of skiing and wants to spend several months a year on the slopes. Someone wants to breed animals on a farm and treat horses. Someone wants to live with family for a weekend away from the city without spending a lot of time on the road. Someone wants to live alone in the wilderness. Someone needs a house an hour from airport due to weekly business trips, and so on. Therefore, the most important and first point is the purpose of your purchase of a plot and your desires and requirements for the sake of which you want to get involved in the long process of acquiring land and construction or buying a turnkey solution. I will talk about the geography of the territory, the ecological situation, and the risks. This will impose restriction on the approximate choice of the territory. And then we will talk about the factors that relate to the site itself, the condition of the land and an overview, the availability of infrastructure, relations with neighbors, involvement of state bodies, and so on. The geography of the site is characterized by topography, landscape, soil type, groundwater, temperatures, winds, and sunshine. The relief is all the irregularities of the earth crust, regardless of their location, size, and composition. It is characterized by lows and highs. That is, whether you want to buy a plot on a mountainside, or on a flat area, or in a lowland. These also belong to lowlands. The landscape is a separate, concretely taken area in a certain zone. It includes more detailed changes in heights, vegetation type, soil type. Landscape features are used in construction, site improvement, and for agricultural purposes. When choosing a place for building a house, it is necessary to conduct the study of the slope of the site. The type of foundation, construction method, additional labor and financial cost for preparing for construction depend on the slope angle. Complex terrain of the site will require large financial investments already at the initial stages. For example, digging a construction pit, drainage, retaining work, and complex engineering work, which can cost even more than building a house itself. When designing houses, it is necessary to take into account the existing buildings located higher up the slope and the location of the roads, if any. It is necessary to secure the site by diverting drain ditches and wiring drain pipes. Construction on the highest area of the site doesn't allow precipitation to accumulate, which ensures optimal surface water runoff. Depending on the elevation differences in a certain area, different situations may arise at your future site. For example, in the spring, meltwater may pass through your site and will flood your land. Or you may be flooded with rainwater from the roads if special drains are not provided or if they are faulty. Or an unscrupulous neighbor can drain waste on his site and it will flow to you. Not all types of terrain are suitable for development. However, it doesn't mean that you should refuse to purchase a site. To date, there are a number of methods for arranging difficult reliefs. The height difference can be compensated in various ways. In architectural design, there are systems for arranging terrains and housing construction on it, which allow you to choose the type of house that suits the slope best. It may be necessary to apply artificial leveling of the site or terracing, a technology that will allow you to strengthen a steep slope with a slope of up to 25 degrees. Or reinforcement of the soil might be necessary. Also, it is possible to merge an architectural structure with natural landscape using a staircase scheme. The right combination of the terrain design and the use of non-standard techniques will create a unique image of the building and, most importantly, will pay off many times over. After all, you built a house once, and paying for irrationally used resources will continue for decades. Relief changes shouldn't contribute to the activation of undesirable erosional, hydrogeological, and hydrological processes not only in your territory but also in adjacent territories. Before starting the selection of materials for the future house and laying the foundation, it is necessary to examine the soil on the site carefully. This may be soils subject to deformation under the influence of temperature changes, the ingress of a large amount of water, and the steepness of the slopes. Clay soils, loams, sandy loams, and peat soils are considered the most difficult to work with. In order to foresee possible problems at the design stage, it is necessary to conduct a special study of the characteristics of the soil. The procedure includes geological surveys, topographic surveys, soil sampling at different depths, tests to measure the degree of soil subsidence under load, the nature of changes in deformation over time, and others. In addition, different historical and scientific maps of soil layers may be found in the public domain or in various relevant organizations. If the analysis shows or you know that your soil will be saturated with water, dwell, deform, then you need to apply a special approach to working with this area. In such cases, to solve the problem of unstable soils, geosynthetic materials are used, geogrids and geotextiles. Certain types of foundations and certain types of buildings are used as well. Depending on composition, additional surface drainage or even additional foundation drainage may be required. Groundwater is the aquifer closest to the surface of the earth, lying on the first aqueduct. Groundwater is extremely unstable due to many factors. The properties of rocks and their water content, the proximity of reservoirs and rivers, the climate of the area, humidity and temperature, and others. But more and more dangerous impact on groundwater is exerted by human activities. Land reclamation, hydraulic engineering, underground works for the extraction of minerals, oil and gas. Agrotechnics with the use of pesticides and fertilizers also poses a danger. And of course, industrial effluents. All contamination from sewer leaks, landfills, oil products, and other results of human activity enters the groundwater. It is groundwater that affects the conditions of construction and dictate the choice of foundation and technology in the design of structures. Without taking into account the behavior and depths of groundwater, it is impossible to make decisions about the possibilities of building basements, arranging a cellar and a sewer septic tank. High groundwater is a limitation in choice. Frost haven of soils is directly dependent on the presence of groundwater. The destruction of foundations and buildings from the forces of frost haven can be enormous. Pushing foundations out of the ground, flooding basements, destruction of road surfaces, flooding and erosion of trenches and pits. Artificial dewatering, open drains and ditches may be required to eliminate or reduce the damaging effects of groundwater. In addition to the physical impact, groundwater can also destroy foundations chemically. It all depends on the degree of groundwater aggressiveness. When designing, this aggressiveness is studied. Both geological and hydrological surveys are carried out. The result will be information about the composition of the soil and the depth of groundwater. This will help to adapt the foundation of a house to specific conditions. The matter is complicated by the fact that behavior of groundwater is closely related to the structure and types of soils on the site. Water and soils must be studied and considered as a whole. The further exploitation of man-made structures is also under the relentless influence of the changing behavior of groundwater. It is advised to choose such contractors who, in case of an accident, will be responsible according to the law. Natural climatic conditions have a huge impact on the way of life, well-being, habits and work of people. There are many places on Earth where heat waves, tropical downpours or severe frosts are commonplace. The factors associated with natural climatic conditions include temperature and humidity of air, seasonal amplitudes, wind strengths, the height of the snow cover, the height above sea level, pressure, the depth of seasonal frosting of the soil, the location of groundwater, air saturation with minerals, and others. For me, as for a person who has lived all his life in a flat area, the height above sea level is a very important factor. People who grow up in mountains do not notice a rise of 500 meters. For me, it's already hard. I need to get used to it because I feel tinnitus, dizziness, air and pressure changes. Vegetation, the presence of insects, amphibians and animals also depend on the climate. Moreover, sometimes the local climate can be different within 5 to 10 kilometers if the regions are in a lowland or on a hill or fall under the sun rays. In harsh climate, it is difficult not only to live but also to work, especially when it comes to construction. When constructing a building, it is important to take into account the natural and climatic conditions of the construction territory, which are essential for making constructive decisions. A component approach is needed to meet production requirements and to prepare workers for such conditions. Compliance with the rules for the placement of rooms and the orientation of the building affects the life of the effective operation of the building materials. First of all, it applies to the roof and walls. Wall enclosing structures and roofing materials are first to suffer from overheating by the sun rays and overcooling. There are lots of points that depend on the placement. Wall enclosing structures, roofing materials, thermal insulation, lane infrastructure with the least freezing, interior decoration of premises taking into account the illumination of the rooms. The location of the house on the site on the cardinal points will save money on heating and cooling the building. will reduce the amount of heat-insulating materials in the walls, will give more light in the rooms, and will simplify the design of the building. Orienting the house to the cardinal points may be difficult if your land plot is not suitable for a certain location. It is necessary to make a choice. Either you build your house according to all the rules and laws of science, or you fulfill your desires and rely on someone else's opinion. It is important to build a smart house where water, heat, and electricity are used rationally. And this can be achieved without resisting natural forces, without struggling with the sun, wind, soil properties, but using all the best that nature gives us. Wind rose is a graphical description of the wind regime in a certain place according to long-term observations. Thanks to wind rose, meteorologists have learned to understand the main pattern of the air flow directions, so they make weather forecast for the near future. The wind rose is used if there are plants that emit harmful substances into the atmosphere. According to the wind rose, the sanitary protection zones of these plants are calculated. The wind rose allows to solve problems related to the agricultural industry. For example, forest plantations, park design, and so on. When the wind blows, it brings snow, rain, and dust. All these precipitations are brought by the wind under the roofs of the porch, the terrace, the front door. Precipitations cool the premises and create a load on the roofs and walls. Often, the house turns out to be an obstacle for the cold air descending from the hills at night, and as a result, the temperature in the building can drop. That's why it is important to evaluate and determine the location of the buildings so that they are placed correctly in relation to each other. Since after construction, you won't be able to change the location. In southern regions with a dry, hot climate, protection from dry winds and dust storms is necessary. In northern regions with low temperatures, snowstorms and strong winds make living conditions harder. Therefore, in such areas, measures are taken to reduce the negative impact of winds. This can be various green spaces, protection from the sun and winds, a certain location of buildings. The number of studies and researches depend on the finances, the complexity of the soil, data given in state databases, the experience of neighbors on other sites. If you don't have experience in building on this land and in determining the factors which are essential for construction, then you need to contact architectural organizations or take consultations in order to understand the possibilities and complexity of construction. All works must be ordered from organizations that have licenses, certificates, and equipment. But in addition, you can find historical maps of land layers, groundwater maps, levels of radiation values in open access or in various relevant organizations. In meteorological organizations, it is possible to obtain data on temperature, direction and trends of winds, air quality, pressure and humidity. You can also communicate with neighbors and at the same time get to know your future neighbors better. A very striking example on how geography affects land conditions is the houses on both sides of the lake in Zurich in Switzerland, where on one side almost all houses are always in the sun because they are located on a sunny slope of the mountain and do not close each other. But on the other side, there is never sun, because houses stand on the shadow side of the mountainous landscape where the sun never reaches. So, houses stand opposite each other across the lake at a distance of several kilometers from each other. They are located in the lowlands of a magnificent lake in the suburbs of Zurich, one of the most expensive cities on the planet. And at the same time, their prices differ hundreds of times. Therefore, don't be fooled and do not chase show-offs. Because if you don't understand the subject and don't want or cannot afford an independent audit, then you will be not a tough guy, but an idiot who was swindled out of money and sold a crap with a beautiful name. If you buy a plot just because you want it, then you may sell it several times cheaper after a few years because you cannot build anything on it. Don't get emotional and look deeper. Therefore, if you skip this part because it seemed incomprehensible to you, then listen to it again. But I don't want to mislead you. Even if you conduct all sorts of independent studies several times, all the results will be approximate. Theory and practice are different things which in 95% of cases do not coincide. But nevertheless, you will have an approximate understanding of the scope of work, financial investments, and the time required. When choosing a region where you want to buy a plot, you need to consider the risks of natural disasters: fire, flooding, earthquakes, droughts, invasion or mass migration of insects, hurricanes, tornadoes and storms, avalanche. Unfortunately, or fortunately, I am not familiar with the most of the natural disasters. For all the time I've been living in Georgia, I encountered an earthquake only once, and it was very weak and almost not felt. And this is my whole experience. But I know that there are states in the USA where natural disasters are a common occurrence. For example, Louisiana and Florida often experience hurricanes. In Texas, Kansas, Oklahoma, Colorado, there are tornadoes, snowstorms, and hurricanes. The entire central part of the United States of America is even called Tornado Alley. Alabama and Tennessee experience frequent snowstorms, tropical storms, and tornadoes. There are great floods in Missouri. California, Alaska, and Nevada are an earthquake ring. In those regions where there is a risk of natural disasters, the government coordinates actions to forecast possible emergencies, prepare for natural disasters, eliminate the consequences of disasters, and take response measures. There is a range of calculations that provide risk assessments. Risk models are calculated and monitored. Interactive maps have been created to observe the elements and predict natural disasters. You can get real-time information about tornadoes, earthquakes, and weather in different regions of the world. In those regions where there is a risk of natural disasters, special requirements are imposed on building structures. Special protective measures are developed, including engineering protection projects. But I will not talk about it in more detail, because this is not my area of activity and because we have a different topic for this video. But with an acceptable level of risk and adequate secure measures without trying to save money, most likely that you won't be threatened by the elements. There is no place on Earth that is 100% safe as long as you are alive. Fear for our lives will be everywhere, wherever we are. Human economic activity is the main source of pollution of the biosphere. Gases, liquid and solid waste enter the natural environment in increasing quantities. The quality of air, soil and water depends on it. Various chemicals getting into the soil, water and air pass through ecological links from one chain to another, eventually getting into the human body. It is almost impossible to find a place on the globe where pollutants wouldn't be present in one concentration or another. Even in the ice of Antarctica, where there are no industrial facilities and people live only at small scientific stations, scientists have discovered various toxic substances of modern industries. They are brought there by air masses and water currents from another continents. The main technogenic factors that have a negative impact on nature and health are the presence of industrial production and farms, the presence of wastewater and landfills, dust and fertilizers from the fields. Abandoned farms also carry risks because, firstly, they can spoil the soil, air and water for decades, and secondly, they can resume work. Radiation background. You will not feel the radiation, and when you do, the changes are already irreversible. Noise, vibration, electromagnetic radiation, the possibility of electric shock in case of accidents. These negative factors are also present when performing wear-and work, and I talked about this in the safety video. You can see the link to it in the top right corner. Noisy transport facilities. Their impact also depends on winds and green spaces, as they direct or trap exhaust gases from motor vehicles. In any case, near highways there is always low air quality and increased pollution of soil and plants with heavy metals. Power lines. This is a security zone. It is forbidden to go under them. There are risks both of falling power lines as well as huge stress and negative impact on health. But in some countries these standards are not met, and people even live in such areas. Moreover, sometimes power lines pass right through the territory of the sites. These are some of the factors that determine the category of land and the types of permitted use. Friends, if you find this video useful for you, let me know about it by following me and turning on notifications in order to know about new useful content on my channel. Statistics shows that people often watch videos without subscription, so I would appreciate a lot if you support me. When considering potential sites for purchase, it is necessary to take into account not only the site itself, but what is in close proximity to it. These are green spaces, reservoirs, animals, availability of infrastructure, transport routes, neighbors, and so on. These factors depend on the location of land. Your lifestyle and availability and possibility of building depend on these factors. Reservoirs, forests, fields, unusual landscape structures, monuments may limit your activities as these territories may be assigned certain categories of lands or a special status. This can be lands of settlements, agricultural lands, protected zones, conservation area, closed territories, and so on. The category of land affects what you can or cannot do on your property. In addition, regardless of the category of land, you may be subject to restrictions on the size of the land, on the construction of buildings, or on the height of buildings. And most likely, you will find it out only after the purchase. Particularly interesting cases are those lands where historical monuments are located, but it doesn't indicate it anywhere. In this case, you will know about it only when you try to approve a land project or a house project in government architectural departments. And it turns out that you have strong restrictions on construction, although the land itself is not of historical value. If the site is located near mountains, a reservoir, a forest, fields, then these are always zones of increased danger that may belong to prohibited or protected areas. If you buy a plot in order to get closer to nature and you are going to visit these territories, then you must take into account the rules for visiting these territories and always follow safety regulations, especially if you have lived in the city in comfortable conditions all your life and haven't had any difficulties. If you want to go serious hiking, Then you first need to study professional literature. After that, start walking short distances with professional instructors. There are different categories of hiking, but this is a separate issue and we are not talking about it today. I went on various hikes and I mentioned it very briefly in my there introductory video. This video was a start point of my project and my channel. Now I don't go hiking, but I look forward to having the time and finances to go on long hikes and professional expeditions and inspire you to do so. Nature means the existence of plants and animals. Plants may be poisonous, listed as protected species, or be of national value. Animals can be dangerous or also listed as protected species, so there is a risk of injury or a fine if encountered. Mushrooms and berries can be poisonous or contaminated due to man-made pollution or industrial activities, or you may need special permits to pick them. In addition, wild animals and birds may appear in private zones. This is increasingly due to the fact that over the past 250 years, a man has been destroying and polluting the natural habitat of animals and birds at an incredible pace. Those who managed to survive and who were not destroyed by a man have to come into contact with a person in order to survive. They are driven by the need for food and warmth after the winter. Garbage dumps, sheds, warehouses are great places to feed and survive. But even harmless animals can be dangerous as they spread disease, attract other animals and damage your property. If unwanted animals are on your property, you can contact special organizations in order not to aggravate the situation and break the law if your life or your property is in danger. Believe me, they don't have desire at all to contact with you, but we ourselves have deprived them of their home and food. When purchasing land, it is very important to inquire about the availability of basic communications. Their absence and land communications can be a major problem. Often, the main value of the site is not the area or even the location, but the availability of communications. There are situations when a builder or a developer promises a civilized life but doesn't fulfill his obligations. It is not realtors who sell the land who tell you truthfully about communications, but special services which have their own areas of responsibility and knowledge about all the possible connection details. The four most important and necessary types of communications for comfortable life are gas, electricity, water supply, and sewerage. Sometimes the cost of conducting and land communications can be cosmic. To obtain water or even gas, it is possible to drill wells if geological studies indicate that there are sources under the ground of your site. However, the price for own water can also be incredibly high. Especially if your site has a difficult terrain or type of soil, there are geological, climatic, technological restrictions or restrictions imposed by the state, or occurrence of groundwater is at a depth of 500 meters. Under certain natural conditions, it is possible to provide energy independence using alternative energy sources. However, getting energy 100% from alternative sources is very difficult and very expensive, so this method is used in certain cases. The availability of infrastructure is also an important factor. Infrastructure means shops, pharmacies, banks, post offices, internet speeds, quality of medical services, and so on. Most often, the infrastructure is correlated with the size of a locality, the presence of important facilities, remoteness from large cities, major transport routes, and transport interchanges. Therefore, these factors are also need to be taken into account when buying land. Another type of communications is the construction of roads. This applies both to the main section of the road and to the access roads, because there might be such situation that 90% of the road can be comfortable and the last 10% will take more time and nerves than 90%. In order to get to my site, where the range is located, I will have to face a series of roads. Based on this fact, the name of the channel appeared. If there are no paved roads, construction will be difficult, as transport of building materials require trucks, which will quickly turn the unpaved road into impassable mud. These issues need to be thought through in advance, and one of the ways to solve this is to use pickup trucks to transport tools and materials. I talked about the functions of pickups and the requirements for different vehicles in the video about the criteria for choosing a car. But perhaps you deliver materials by ship or helicopter, and in general you are not interested in delivering materials but in the results, since you are used to giving orders and do not think about primary conditions and how difficult it is to complete tasks. Then this information is irrelevant to you. Neighbors are an important factor, since as a rule, people need a social circle in a new place, and people prefer to build friendly relations. In my opinion, the main signs are not the availability of money and a rich house, but the absence of neighbors at all. I am kidding. In my opinion, the main features are adequacy, good upbringing, and cleanliness. There are people who fight, steal, burn dangerous and chemical waste, dump waste in open ground, rent houses for parties. There are troubled people who make attempts to establish a compulsively closed bond with other people's animals and children. Therefore, it will be important to communicate with residents and ask questions, but discreetly and carefully, as a new person is often treated with caution and attracts a lot of attention. The main factors for choosing the size of the site are the cost of the site, what you want to place on it, and how much work and investments will be required. Most often, the financial issue comes first, but expensive doesn't mean big or good, and cheap doesn't mean small or bad. There are practices of selling of unclaimed plots, selling at auctions, urgent sellings in remote places. There are certain rules that are used to determine the approximate area of the site depending on what will be located there. It is worth understanding that in addition to the general concept of the area, there is also the concept of a building footprint. When choosing a site, it is necessary to take into account the requirements of the legislation on the location of buildings from the boundaries of the site and requirements of fire and sanitary hygienic safety. The complex shape of the site will create restrictions on the layout and the construction of buildings. And given all the factors that I mentioned above, for example, the location on the cardinal points or drilling a well, you may not have enough space or simply not like the result. This doesn't mean that you shall refuse from the site of complex shape. Like difficult terrain, it can be beaten, and you will get an unusual individual solution and even advantages. A large plot, as usual, will allow you to place everything you want, but it entails a lot of labor and huge cost on its improvement and maintenance. Everything has its pros and cons, so it is important to develop the project carefully and work out each stage of construction. Construction begins not with the preparation of the construction site and the laying of the foundation, but much earlier. It is unknown which stage will be the most expensive for you: preparatory work, foundation installation, laying of communications, engineering work, or other works, or all at once. It depends on the area you choose. There may be dilapidated capital buildings on the site. For example, a sauna, a barn, an old duck foundation, which you will find out only after purchase. They will also bring additional costs, as there is the need to exploit them further somehow or to demolish them, which includes obtaining permits, coordinating work, decommissioning, demolition costs, and disposal of construction waste. The presence of green spaces also dictates the rules, imposes restrictions, or creates advantages. Plantings and valuable trees can be preserved and sometimes need to be preserved. Unkept gardens can be ennobled. So the natural conditions, with the combination of your efforts, will quickly create a natural, comfortable environment. But some plants are in general forbidden to be cut down, and they are listed in state databases despite the fact that they are located on private property. If you are going to clean up the state from certain plantings, you need to check the availability of felling rights, the need for permits, and the cost of felling. Government plans and construction projects also influence how a place of residence will look like in a few years or decades. These plans may include the construction of settlements, transport interchanges, railways, factories, as well as the drainage of reservoirs, deforestation, land reclamation, hydraulic engineering, underground mining operations. You can buy a plot in a backcountry with the prospect of developing infrastructure and even creating jobs. But another situation is possible when your site is included in the construction projects of the state or corporations, and in a few years the land category will be changed and the site will be taken away from you. Even if the insurance pays for all the damages, this is hardly what you wanted when you bought the land, because you moved to a place that you want to see for many years to come. On the part of the state, there may be obligations or assistance in arranging the site. There may be commitments to construction, for example, starting construction in the next 6 months, requirements for the layout of the house, requirements for choosing a contractor, and others. Also, the state can provide services for clearing roads, responding to emergencies, evacuation, which in many countries are available by default as a part of social programs. In the presence of other types of services, government agencies can facilitate the laying of the internet, waste disposal, rental of construction equipment, installation of foundations, and so on. But government agencies can also interfere with your construction if their task is to stretch all the deadlines as much as possible and to make the red tape unbearable in order to extort money from you as much as possible. In addition, you need to take into account that you may want to participate in the development of the nearest territory actively. For example, lobby for the development of infrastructure, organize physical labor to improve the territory, and so on. So, you have taken into account all these factors, made sure that the chosen place meets your infrastructure requirements, learned about water, soil, weather, and other factors. After choosing a site, you can finally begin to draw up documents. It is necessary to find out who is the real owner, to exclude the presence of arrest, pledge, encumbrances, litigation over land. It is necessary to verify the authenticity of the documents and the correctness of their completion. It should be noted that for foreigners, in 99% of cases, all prices can be a dozen times higher and all registration procedures can last a dozen times longer. It depends not only on the factors I talked about, but also on the prestige of the place. But this is not the topic of my video. The rational use of lands in terms of preserving their natural uniqueness is one of the most important tasks today. Most often, development is subject to economic expediency, which means the degradation of natural resources. Such places can be territories with complex relief that often have high recreational and aesthetic qualities, as well as cultural and historical significance. With money, power, and connections, you can do anything and anywhere. If you have resources, it is possible to negotiate with 99% of people and destroy historical monuments, cut down ancient trees and natural parks, drain lakes, evict thousands of people from certain places. But is it possible to call yourself a human after such activities? I strongly condemn such actions. No money can replace the adequacy of thinking, a valuable attitude towards nature, and respect for other people. Fortunately, there are still enough people who understand this. But among these people, only 1% of 1% will decide to do something and not just look or talk. I hope that you like the information I give you and you share it with your friends so more people will see useful content thanks to you. It was Valeria, the Off-Road Range. Wish you all the best and see you soon.